Welcome here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We appreciate you being here with us inside the Great Lakes Honda City studios. Great Lakes Honda City coming to you on 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard in Liverpool, New York. You can go and get a sneak peek at their inventory by going to greatlakeshondacity.com. Picture in picture with me right now is the longtime college football head coach and just longtime connection to college football in general. In his retirement, he has kept that mind sharp. We've had fantastic conversations. I love talking with Randy Edsall. I'm not just saying that because he's on the screen. And you see that he's wearing a Syracuse pullover here, and he was an assistant coach on this Syracuse team. And I'm going to say it, whether he wants me to say it or not publicly, I'm going to say it. He's the coach we never had that we should have had. And if we had him, it stands to reason that after Paul Pasqualoni, there wouldn't have been that 20 years of darkness. So with that being said, Mr. Edsall, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. I appreciate that. And just enjoying life.
Yeah, I mean, and what I love about our conversations is we've gotten to have them, obviously, with you being in the second home of my company and second home for me in general, which is the state of Florida. As we've had these conversations, we've gotten to, have different backgrounds for you. And now this is probably my favorite one. Bring me into this room and the room of helmets. I like that you got a little Hall of Fame going on at the Edsall household.
Yeah, I have a helmet from every place that I've coached at over the years. And a friend of mine actually did that, and I'd gotten him some helmets and things like that, and he put them up, and he told me where he got the things to you could put them into the wall and put them up. So in terms of the helmets, and then the game balls that I've gotten from bowl games and big wins, I put them up here on the walls here in the base downstairs of our home. And it's nice when I walk down here. It's just kind of a little bit of a memory of where I was, and because to me the biggest thing for me was when I was coaching, it was giving young men an opportunity and having them come to your institution, and then working with them for 4 or 5 years and just see them grow as a player, as a person, and and that's the thing. And as a student, that was the thing that I really enjoyed doing, just to watch them go from when they were freshmen till when they graduated. And, to me, the sad part of it is I think a lot of that is lost now. I don't think that's the intent and what has happened with college football today.
No, you're right. And it's about the development. And I know a friend of yours, friend of mine, Steve Adazio, him and I spoke about that. Can we live in a world where development is happening anymore with student athletes? And it's hard because, and I can't even, I know I've talked about it. I guess the easy way to address it is to call the transfer portal and NIL free agency, but it's not even free agency because free agency has parameters. So we're looking at the teams right now, Randy, and we're looking at Indiana, who's undefeated at the time of our conversation, and their quarterback Mendoza came from Cal. We look at Ohio State with Sayin, but before that, you bring in a Will Howard to win a national championship who came from Kansas State. And there's this constant movement of quarterbacks, right? And I mean, Syracuse had Steve Angeli, who was on Notre Dame's team last year, and he was backing up Riley Leonard, stepped in a game against Penn State in the college football playoff and went 6 of 7 and helped them win that game, which was a 3-point victory. So, I mean, we talk about the quarterback position and how you can have everything else on your team. Great special teams, great kicker, great punter, great running backs, great wide receivers, great offensive line, great defensive line, great secondary, great linebackers. But if you don't have a quarterback, you're probably not winning anything at the end of the season. And one of the things that we see move the most is the quarterback position. And some of these teams that are undefeated and teams that are doing well and teams that are having success this year are having success from taking a quarterback from another team. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the Wild Wild West that is, the wild horses with no fence around them. It's worse than free agency, and just what it's done. Even if we just look at the quarterback position, Randy, knowing that teams that are successful a lot of those teams have taken a quarterback that was in a different jersey last year.
Yeah, the quarterback is a very important position, and probably the most important position, because if you don't have a quarterback, you're not really going to be very successful, regardless of what you have in the other phases of your team on offense, defense, and special teams. So,
Right.
You have to have that guy. And what's interesting to me is the fact that teams don't develop quarterbacks, because if you're developing a quarterback before the transfer portal took place and everything else, you should have a guy on your roster if you've done the job you're supposed to do from a recruiting standpoint and from a developmental standpoint. The thing that really kind of bothers me a little bit about this whole situation is I really don't think, and I know they're changing it. It used to be 2 opportunities for kids to go into the portal and be able to leave, and now they're cutting it down to 1.
Yeah.
I still think it should only be 1, but I'm a firm believer that 1 period should come after spring ball, because I think what should happen is kids finish the year, and then you should go through spring ball and you should fight your way to see where you can get yourself on the depth chart, instead of just, moving, at that point in time. Go through it and finish the whole year. So from an academic standpoint, you can do that. And to me, the transfer portal should be in May. Then the kid goes in there, and then he's got June and July where he can go in with his team and work. But I'm sure that's not going to happen. But and then, even some of these schools, they make poor decisions on who they bring in as a quarterback from the transfer portal, and they don't pan out. And then all of a sudden after spring ball, oh, we got to go get another guy. Well, now they go get another guy, and you paid one guy money to come, and then he's not good. And then you got another guy coming who's performing better, who's not probably getting paid as much money. And now you got these dynamics all throughout your team. It's just one big mess, and it's just a situation that the NCAA is, they're not going to clean it up because they're afraid of lawsuits, and they don't win lawsuits. So it's worse than the NFL, and it's very, very difficult to manage from a personnel standpoint, from a monetary standpoint, and also I think from a morale standpoint in terms of your team.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it is. It's very hard. I'm a proponent that there shouldn't be 2 openings of the portal for college football. I think there should be 1. I agree with you. I don't like the timing of them, right? Because you have one that opens before the end of the postseason. So the regular season ends, the portal opens, and you got guys that are going, yeah, okay, like I know my team's in a bowl game or in the college football playoff, but I'm the backup quarterback, so I'm on the team, but I'm not on the team, and I'm not going to play for you in case anything happens because I got to market myself for somebody else. And I was at the SMU Penn State game last year in the first round of the college football playoff, and both of their backup quarterbacks were in the portal. So they're there, but they're not available. And
Right.
so there's that side of it, right? And then there's the season ends and you're frustrated, or a coach gets fired, or you're nervous, or you didn't have the season you wanted to have, or you're not in the playoff and you decide to transfer. Now the bowl games are diluted, the college football playoffs diluted. And then when you talk about right after spring practice, again, I mean, think about that. I leave in the spring. I got your playbook. I got the ins and outs and the inner workings of your team. You can't tell me where I can't go, including in conference. So I go to spring ball with Alabama. I leave. I go to Texas A&M, and I say, here's everything Coach DeBoer is doing. Here's everything that we got going on. Here's all the plays that we run. And so now I'm essentially becoming a mole for somebody else. And so I think I agree with you. There should be 1 opening, and it should be after you get an education. Oh my gosh, you're making them go to class. Oh my gosh, you're making them actually have a year under their belt. And if you have it in May, it's not affecting anything. It's not affecting the bowls. It's not affecting the playoff. It's not affecting somebody going through spring ball, then going to another school and taking that playbook to fall ball. So, I mean, I like your thoughts on that because, Randy, let's be honest, what's happening right now with the transfer portal, having it at the times that you have it is affecting one season and it's affecting the other season. And again, why are people not talking about the fact that I can go to spring ball at Syracuse, transfer to North Carolina, and tell Bill Belichick everything that Fran Brown's doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think now that they have the one thing in January or whatever, but I just don't like the timing of that. From the standpoint of, like you said, guys are opting out of bowl games. I don't know why they have bowl games after the playoffs, because they don't mean anything. And, the whole thing has changed from the standpoint. It used to be a reward to go to a bowl game. Now it's not a reward. It's just a way for ESPN to get programming, because they own most of the bowls to begin with. So I just think, from the most ethical and logical way, and for the kids' benefit academically and everything else, they should be able to transfer, but it shouldn't come until after the spring semester. They're signing a 1-year renewable scholarship, so finish out the year and go somewhere after that year's over. Now, if you want to start and what'll happen, you'll get some guys that'll start the spring semester and then they won't go through spring practice, whatever, because they don't want to get hurt. Well, to me, if I'm at another school and I see a guy doing that, I'm saying to myself, maybe this isn't the right guy. It's just one big mess right now, and there doesn't seem like there's anybody trying to come up with common sense solutions to trying to make the situation as best they can.
Yeah, and you mentioned ESPN and having the bowl games and whatnot. ESPN, for almost a couple weeks now at the time of our conversation, Disney has been fighting, who owns ESPN and ABC. They've been fighting with Google, that owns YouTube TV. So a lot of people that cut the cord and left cable over the last many years, me included, and have gone to a place like YouTube TV, which I have. We got a message from Google that said, not only are we fighting with Disney, and not only are we going to not have access to any of these channels that you're paying for, but we're going to delete your entire library. Now, somebody like me, who's a broadcaster of over 20 years, I have like 200 games, college football games that I saved. They said, we're deleting the entire library and we're not going to have access because Disney and Google are fighting. I said, well, figure out whoever's going to get the extra penny in your deal, and let's make this work. But there are people that are watching and listening to us right now, Randy, that have not been able to watch the majority of college football because of the SEC's deal and the Americans deal and the ACC's deal with ESPN and with ABC. So there's a ton of content that's been gone. And you talk about, ESPN having the rights to these bowls and that it makes them money and whatnot. What is your thought on Disney and Google feuding to the point where now fans are paying $82.99 to have YouTube TV, which used to be $69.99 or maybe even cheaper, and is constantly added. And now I really don't want to hear from Google saying, well, we reached a deal with Disney. It's only going to cost you $5 more a month because we're not going to pay for it. We're going to put it off on our subscribers. What's your take on all this? Because there's people watching and listening to us right now that haven't been able to watch more than half of the college football games because Disney and Google can't seem to figure out a price.
Yeah, well, I'm a YouTube TV subscriber, so
so much.
So yeah, I don't get any of those things, but and there's going to be some people that want to watch it that are just going to go and pay it, and and here's the thing, Dan, college athletics, the problem is it's all come down to money, everything, and now it transfers over to TV. It's not only what's happened with players, but now it's transferred to TV, and Google, they might not want to pay that. You get that. I mean, they're a company, they want to make money and everything else, and ESPN has become a big monopoly with everything that they're trying to do and all those things. And you know what? I just won't watch it. It's as simple as that. When I don't need that. I've got other things that I can do to take, with my time, that I don't care if I do watch it. There's other networks that I'll watch, Fox and Fox Sports 1 and CBS Sports Network and CBS, and I'll watch that, and then guess what? You get your football fix with watching the NFL, because you can get those on mainstream TV. And so I just think what happens is with some of this is that these cable people, are greedy, and they're gonna, at some point in time, people are just gonna say, I've had enough, and I'm not gonna watch, because they can't keep, some people just can't afford to keep paying more money each month with the prices that these entities are going to charge.
Yeah, I mean, when I cut the cord to cable, it was $69.99. Now YouTube TV is $82.99. So it's now costing me more to not have cable because
Right.
of everything that's gone on with Google and Disney. And, allegedly they say that Disney's lost $5 million a day not being on YouTube TV. And look, they're still alive. They're still afloat. And I'm sure that they'll add those prices to the Disney park tickets, so nobody at Disney has to lose a penny. And that's the
Right.
sad part of this all is, you and I have talked about a lot of things behind the scenes. And, I appreciate capitalism in the sense that I'm a business owner and I can continue to make money with no ceiling. But I'm also a business owner that's probably one of the only people in this country that hasn't raised my prices on the businesses that I work with. I have not punched them in the face during COVID, figuratively. I have not added all of this to them. So I just, that's the thing, Randy, that I really don't like, is that as gas prices have gone higher and, things, I mean, everything costs us more.
Right.
But that's because these billion-dollar, trillion-dollar, million-dollar companies are saying, well, our bottom line is this, and everything's gone up. So instead of saying, you know what, we're going to make a little less surplus this year, they say, no, just keep passing the buck until it gets to you and me. And ultimately, that's where we are right now, is that a Disney or a Google is going to say, well, hey, at the end of our taxes and everything else, we make $20 million. And this year, with everything rising, we're only going to make 17. So now we got to find a way to charge that extra 3 million to somebody somewhere so that we still make 20. And you just see tickets go higher and higher and higher and higher. And I look at all this money that Disney has with ESPN and all these contracts with ESPN, and then I go to a Disney park and it's $87. Now it's $187. So I can't help but think to myself, Disney bought the NBA and they bought the NFL and they bought this, they bought that. But am I paying now $100 more to go to Magic Kingdom because Disney has Monday Night Football? Just makes you think about those things.
Well, you can't just stop with ESPN and the TV people. Now you got to take a look at the universities as well, because the universities, they don't mind spending money that they really don't have. So, in terms of coaching contracts,
Yeah.
In terms of what they charge for tickets, and ticket prices continually go up. So, now all of a sudden they gotta take $20 million of their revenues and put it back into the student athlete. So that's 20 million shortfall of what they have to pay the bills. So what are they going to do? They're going to find a way to, put more, make people pay more to come watch games, to pay more for concessions, at those games, all those different things that go on. So you got a problem with not just television. Now you got a problem, like I said, with the institutions and what they're charging. And so now it's a snowball that's going downhill, and it's like, where's it going to stop? And it's just like, one of the things is that there's not a lot of accountability to me in college athletics and nowadays. And when you take a look, like Bo Schembechler never won a national championship, but he was at Michigan for all those years. And now people think that everybody's got to win a national championship when only probably 7, 8 teams maybe really have the capability to win a national championship in college football. But yet they're going and spending money because they don't know who they are. They think that there's somebody that they're not. And when you take a look at these athletic directors, presidents, board of trustee members shelling out these contracts that they shell out to the coaches, and then they fire them and they have to pay these buyouts. I mean, to me, those ADs and those presidents ought to be fired. To me, if anybody gives a head coach any more than 5 years in this day and age, because of the environment that we're in, with the name, image, and likeness, with the portal, they ought to be fired immediately, because no coach needs more than 5 years. And because of what you can do and go out and replenish a roster, people bringing in 40 to 50, some 70 people new from 1 year to the next in terms of their roster. And it's schools that they're wannabes, but they don't know how to be, and they're never going to be a top tier school and have an opportunity to win a national championship. So, it's everyone that's involved that's created this, to me, this unsustainable model that they have going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I talked to my dad about this week. I said, where does it stop? How does it stop? Do you have to stop going to the games? Do you have to stop paying for parking? Do you have to stop buying food? Do you have to stop buying jerseys? I mean, what do you do to tell? Because it seems like whenever a school is losing money, they just charge the community more. When, a network is losing money, they just charge their subscribers more. When a big multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar company makes a bad decision and where they put their money, they just charge more somewhere else. I've said it before, if cable has 200,000 subscribers and they lose half, then they just charge the 100,000 that they have double. And then you're going to lose more. So, I mean, at what point does the snowball stop? What do we have to do, Randy? Do people have to stop going to games, stop buying cable, stop going, getting parking, stop buying jerseys? At what point do you look at a school and say, hey, yeah, y'all agreed for the $20 million. The ACC and the SEC and the Big 12 and the Big 10, they had to, in order to have this settlement with the NCAA, you agreed to find $20 million to pay your student athletes. You agreed to that. The people that come and sit in your stands and buy hot dogs and beer, they didn't agree to that. They can't afford that. So, I mean, what has to happen to turn to a school and say, yeah, it's great that you got that deal, but you as an institution agreed to the $20 million, not the people that live in your city.
Well, that's never going to change until people stop going to games. If people don't go to games and people don't subscribe to the cable networks or the streaming networks, that's when it all changes. Because as long as people are willing to pay and do those sort of things, but these schools that aren't top tier schools are going to struggle because they're not going to win, and then people aren't going to come to the games, and it makes it hard. But and there's only a handful of schools that actually make money off of football. Everybody else is losing money, and it's so where's spending the money that you bring in and put back into your program? Because some of these schools, they can take the $20 million, they can do things with name, image, and likeness, and guess what? It's never going to make a difference, for them to make the college football playoff. It's just not going to happen. And as an institution, you need to know that, and when Texas A&M and Texas Tech, the money that they're spending, Ohio State, what they spent, what Michigan spent the year before, there's only a handful of schools that have the ability to do that. And then the thing that goes with that is, kids are making money off of name, image, and likeness, and they're not even doing anything for that money. They're tweeting maybe a couple things here and there and everything else. Yeah. And so what are you teaching these kids? They're making money by basically not doing something. So now when they get out in the real world, and most of the players aren't going to be going on to the NFL anyhow, what are they going to think? I should get something for nothing now? Because that's basically it's what's happening with quite a few of the student athletes nowadays in terms of what they have to do for name, image, and likeness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's that. I mean, and you're speaking to my ears, and the reality of it all, of like, why do people not want to work at the jobs that they have? Why do they not want to do certain things? Because they've been trained that they don't have to. And I think I said this during COVID. I said, when you told everybody to stay home and you were going to just hand them checks, you told a society that was not responsible to remain irresponsible. And then after all that stopped and you said, now it's time to get responsible, you've already shown them that they don't have to be. So why would they change? Just
Right.
like I tell people, I don't work for free. Because if I work for free, then I'm always going to work for free. Just like when you give people money to stay at home, then they're always going to want to stay at home and do that. Once you create the environment, you can't just walk to it and go, oh, now I'm going to change it. Because
Right.
they're going to ask you, well, if it was free for 3 years, why is it not free the fourth? If I could stay home and do nothing and get a $600 check, then why do I have to do something now? And that's the environment we're kind of living in right now. And I've told people this before. I said, why don't you hire me? I built my brand out of thin air with God. We're 22 years into me being a broadcaster, and over half of that time has been within my own business. I said, why don't you hire me at schools and institutions to go and travel and have these conversations, to publicly speak with these student athletes and say, I've built my entire business on me being my brand.
Right.
So I can talk to you about what that takes, what that means. You can't just smile and go, oh, I work with Columbia, so I'm just going to take a picture like this and get 300 likes. That's all well and good. And let's say that quarterback, let's say that they had 300,000 people view that post. How many of those 300,000 people went and bought anything from Columbia? It's
Right.
a lot more than taking a picture and smiling. And, I feel like we've completely devalued what it is to advertise and to promote something, because it's all about the likes and the clicks and the retweets and this and that. And I'm like, that's not what it's about. There could be 300,000 people that like a post of somebody taking a picture with, a refillable mug, and then I can have 1,400 people watch a video that I did, but I'm actually getting those people to go to that restaurant, as opposed to your 300,000 people that are never going to buy anything from Columbia. So, I mean, I think we've gotten really, really, really focused on quantity, and very rarely, Randy, do we focus now on quality. And that's where I think the problem lies at this moment in time.
Well, there's no question about that. And and again, another problem that I have is these college kids are making more than what NFL people are making, who have proven themselves and have done it day in and day out. And you have college guys that haven't done it day in and day out, and they're making all this money. And again, I was a proponent of giving the kids like a $20,000 stipend, put it in their scholarship. That's all you'd have to do. But to do the way it's done now, I would never give, I'm a graduate of Syracuse, and I would never give money for name, image, and likeness, because I don't believe in it. I don't believe college players should be getting paid. I think they should get a stipend in their within their scholarship to be able to do those sort of things. And but I would never. And I think that's one of the things that's happening. It's going to be interesting to see, because you get these institutions that are going to go out and ask people for money for name, image, and likeness, and then all of a sudden they go out and get somebody, and that person isn't good enough, and he's gone after a year, and now you're going to go and ask people for money for name, image, and likeness, when you made a mistake as an institution and coaching staff on a kid, and you basically threw that money away, and now you want more money? How can I trust you to make the right decisions, with the money, And so you get into those situations where, the NFL is a totally different entity. They got a salary cap, they're everything's pretty much slotted with the draft and all those sort of things. But in college, there's, like I said, there's no rules, there's no parameters, there's nothing to hone in on what everybody can pay. And it's unfortunate that and to me, if it doesn't change, then I think there's going to be bigger problems, within the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, and they keep talking about, the 20 million this year. It's going to go up, and then it's going to go up, and it's going to go up. And I said this to my dad. I said, if everything keeps going up, then no one's going to be able to afford it. You're going to have like 100 rich people and billions of poor people, and it just doesn't make any logical sense. The money of it all really doesn't make sense. But I do want to take a look beyond that to the talent that we do have and to who is where. And one thing I can't understand, Randy, and I'm going to share it with you, and you and I feel like are on the same wavelength in a lot of ways, but it's something called the eye test. I don't get it. Okay. Now I understand the one with cover one eye and you look, but I don't understand the eye test of a college football team. When it's been suggested and perpetuated yearly that Notre Dame always passes the eye test. Now, they're a top 10 team, according to the College Football Playoff Committee. But I do this thing where I research, and I have to be able to argue everything that I do. So when I'm putting my top 25 together, I have to be able to argue why this team is 22 and not 21. I have to argue why this team's in the top 10 and this team is not. Why is this team here and they're not? Why is this team that has one more loss better than this team that doesn't? And when I'm assessing Notre Dame or any team, I look at college football the way I look at college basketball. I say, okay, college basketball has quad wins. Quad 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I said, okay, I'm going to do the same thing with college football because it's easy to describe. Quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. If you are Indiana and you beat Illinois, who had no business being in the top 10, who had beaten 3 unranked teams to be number 9, Indiana beats Illinois by 50 plus. What top 10 ranked team, Randy, have you seen in college football in the last decade that's lost by more than 50 points? You probably can't name one.
I really couldn't name one.
But you can name Illinois this year. So
right.
I'm not giving Indiana credit for beating Illinois, who is number 9, because you're at the mercy of what that team truly is, what they become. So I'm going to say Indiana, that win over Illinois, I'm going to call it a quad 3 win. It's not a quad 1 win. So let's go to the argument of Notre Dame, who people say passes the eye test. Now I get on the teleconference calls and I listen. And the conversation about Notre Dame was they passed the eye test. So I look at Notre Dame and I say, okay, they almost beat Miami, but they didn't. They lost by 3. They almost beat Texas A&M, but they didn't. They lost by 1. They beat USC, who's their only ranked win of the season, and USC lost to Illinois. And USC doesn't have any quad 1 or arguably quad 2 wins. So what does that USC win really mean? Are they a top 20 team? I don't think so. And then they beat Navy, who they beat every year. Whether Navy's undefeated or not, they beat Navy from many, many times over many, many years. So Notre Dame's a top 10 team because they, quote unquote, passed the eye test. And I say to you, Randy, if you're drunk at a bar and the lights are off, everybody in that room passes the eye test. So I would love to get your thoughts on whether or not you truly believe Notre Dame, based on their body of work, is a top 10 team nationally.
Well, I don't think that they are, but I don't know who all the top 10 teams would be, because here's my issue with all that, Dan, is this. Yeah. And I understand it's the system that we have right now.
Yeah.
But I think this is a joke when they start going like tonight. They're going to give the rankings again, the ratings again for who's ranked there and all this and everything else. And you mentioned Miami's not the same team that they were. They got 2 losses now, and they're not playing that well. So that loss, is not a really good loss. The Texas A&M, thing is, but until I don't think you can rank these people the right way in the way the system is set up right now, just because of it's not Indiana's fault in terms of who they're playing. They're given a schedule by the Big Ten that they have no control over. And all these conferences, teams don't have a control. So you can, like Indiana, they're going out and winning every game. So they're doing what they're supposed to do, regardless of who they beat. Now you start getting into, well, they beat this team by this much, they beat that team by this much. Well, you know, it's hard to evaluate to me until you get a system where you end up, and because you're never going to get the SEC and the Big Ten to do anything to separate and whatever because of the egos of the commissioners involved with those two conferences. But to me, until you get like a 420 team conferences that have 4 or 5 team divisions, and each one of those division teams play each other home and away, then they play, that's 8 games. Then they play, somebody else from their games from, the people within their conference. And then you end up having 4 winners. Those 2 play, you come up with a champion, and you do the same thing with the 3 other things. Now you act just like the NFL model. The NFL's not ranking anything like this because it's all done on the field.
Yeah.
How you can evaluate people based on 12 people in a room making decisions. Some of them, to me, don't know if it's blown up or stuffed. And you're looking at computer data and all this stuff. It's still what happens on the field. So that's the issue that I have with the college football rankings. And Notre Dame gets a pass because they're not in a conference. They don't play in a conference, and they know it. And that's why Notre Dame is smart, because they know that they've got it the best of anybody going. So they're never going to try to go to a conference. And then until somebody forces them, they're going to do what they do because they got the best chance of getting to the college football playoff than anybody.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, and like you say, you play the games that are, and I agree with you about Notre Dame. Why would you join, right? Because you look at these teams and, well, you can't let that team in because they didn't play in their championship. And then, there's arguments of like, it's good to not play in your championship because if you have 1 loss and you don't make it to your conference championship and you're in the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, or the Big 12, then whatever team plays in it, if they have 2 losses and then you only have 1 loss, they're going to let in the winner of that and then let you in even though you didn't play in it. And so there's like all these weird rules, and then there's rankings of Oklahoma above Texas. They have the same overall record and Texas beat Oklahoma. So there's certain common sense things that don't make sense, but I've done my research, and sometimes people respect that and sometimes people go nuts off of it. But see, if I'm going to put out a top 25, Randy, I'm going to do my homework. And when I look at Ohio State, I say, okay, Ohio State has 1 quad 1 win, Texas. And Texas has fluctuated.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. That's not Ohio State's fault because Ohio State. That's Ohio. The Big Ten gives them the schedule now, and then you schedule certain teams. You schedule certain teams, and the non-conference schedules are made up 4, 5, 6 years ahead of time. So you don't know how good you think somebody could be good, and then you play them down the road and they're not good. So that's why I'm saying it's such a flawed system, in my opinion. Now, again, I know you have to have a system to evaluate with to determine who the people are that get to the playoff. But to me, I would think that there should be people working to try to do something that's more equitable, and you don't have to worry about what you're talking about, quad 1 wins, quad 2 wins. NFL's not looking at quad 1 wins or anything like that. And again, if you broke that down within the conferences like that, then everybody has a legitimate chance to get to the college football, the Final Four. Because if you win your your division within your conference, guess what? You're going to the semifinals. Then if you win that game, you're going to the finals of your conference. And then you win your conference championship, you're into the Final Four. And guess what? You've earned it on the field. You didn't earn it on the eye test.
So then to you, if the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 you were talking about having 20 teams. So you're regionalizing and you're putting conferences there. But for argument's sake, let's say it's those 4 conferences. If it's those 4 conferences that split into divisions, and then each of those divisions, the champions of that play until you get a champion, then essentially your college football playoff would be the winner of the Big Ten, the winner of the Big 12, the winner of the SEC, and the winner of the ACC, and then they would all compete on an equal playing field. Then none of the conferences are like who's better than who, but then I guess you rank the four when you get to it. But what you're essentially saying is do it like the NFL does it. Here's our
you don't even have to rank them when they get to it. You just have it like, okay, this year SEC and the ACC play each other in the semifinals, and the Big Ten and the Big 12, and then you switch it. Say another year, you can do it.
Yeah,
you can do it that way. But until to me, you don't have a true national champion when you're doing it the way that they do it now. I mean, like I said, it's the best of what they got, and yeah, it is a national championship and all that. But to me, I'm a firm believer. It should be decided on the field. It shouldn't be decided in a boardroom, with 12 people making those decisions when, it should be done. And again, college football has gotten professional. It's professionalized. It's no different than the NFL for the most part. So let them do that and play it out that way. Now maybe they don't make as much money, and again, it gets back to money again. And so that's the only thing that I would like to see, because I just don't trust the people in that room, to make those decisions, and like I said, when you start comparing the seeding, because the seeding can be a big thing, that can be a big thing in terms of how those 12 teams are seeded. And, it could hurt somebody based on the decisions made in those rooms. But when you play it like that, in terms of playing in divisions, just like the NFL, now it's done on the field. Now, to me, you eliminate all those things. And then, what you do, it's the NFL. They don't worry about, they take NFC and AFC, and they kind of got that model a little bit, and you just make it different, like I said, Big Ten and all that. And then they split it up. And, like I said, the ACC, keep your West Coast teams, Cal, Stanford, SMU, and throw one other team in there. And like the Big Ten, you got it already. Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. So those teams, and again, you talk about student athletes and the travel, then they don't have to travel as far, and different things. So I don't know. I guess that just makes too much sense for some people.
Well, what you're doing is you're asking each conference to regionalize itself, fight within those regions, have out-of-region games like the NFL does. So essentially, the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12 would all be versions of the NFL in and of themselves, but then their champions would play each other. So it would be like the NFL model times 4, and then we see who wins through all of that, and we go from there. But like you said, I mean, now you're talking about getting back to regions, getting back to things that make sense, and saying, okay, if you win, and now you're treating every conference the same.
Exactly.
Now you're essentially treating every conference the same. So, which I like, because here's the next conversation that comes off of that. Let's go to the American, because you coached in the American. And being a part of the American when UConn was there before they made the horrendous decision of flying off in space by themselves for football, when you were there and you were within the American Conference, there were teams that went undefeated. There was a team in UCF that still to this day, I don't know any school, any professional league, anywhere. I don't know any team in America, any sport at any time, at any level, that went undefeated, lost their entire coaching staff, and then went undefeated again until they played a bowl game. And so we had a UCF that went 25-0 that never played for a national championship. And within that time period, UCF beat Auburn, who that year had beaten Alabama and Georgia, who played for the national championship. So how does UCF not get to play for a national championship when they beat the team that beat the two teams that played for it? And why is Auburn not in the college football playoff when they beat the two teams that played for a national championship? So none of that made any sense. But this is the argument I'm getting to. When I said Indiana's not the number one team in the country at the time that I was saying it, like 3 weeks ago, I said they're not number one, they're not number two. A bunch of Indiana fans lost their mind on me. They didn't ask me where I put Indiana. I put them at 3 or 4 So we're fighting over. They're not 1 and 2, but I got them in the top 4. So what are we fighting over? In the essence of all this, they're still going to make it. But they said to me, "Hey Dan, we beat every team we played." To your point, Randy, we're undefeated. We can't help the teams that we play in the record that they have or the quad that they're in. We beat them. But I said to them, if you're going to say that, then why is Memphis not in the top 10 at the time? If you're going to say that, then why is BYU where they were? Why is James Madison where they are? Why is Coastal Carolina a few years ago not cracking the top 10? Why is UCF not cracking the top 10? So to your point, Randy, of conferences forming divisions and then treating everybody the same, if Indiana should be in the top 2 because they can't help who they play and they're undefeated, then why are we not saying that about South Florida early on the season? Why are we not saying that about Memphis?
Well, because they're not in the upper echelon. They're not one of the big boys. And that's the problem. And that's why, to me, the 4 major conferences, the Power 4, should just go their own separate way. Group of 5 should have their own separate championship, and just do it that way. Because basically what has happened is the Power 4 is up here. Then you have, the Group of 5, 1 AA, 2 and 3. So basically, the Group of 5, 1 AA, FCS, Division 2 and Division 3, they've been Division 2 a little bit, and most especially 1 AA. They become a feeder. They become the minor leagues for the Power 4 conferences. And so the Group of 5 is never going to get the respect that they because they don't play people. And again, when you take a look, okay, you play an SEC schedule, it's a lot different than playing the American schedule, and so that's why I think just stop playing the game and think you're being fair when you're really not being fair, and just Power 4, go off and have your own deal, and then Group of 5, have your own deal. FCS already has it, Division 2 and Division 3. So it's already there, in terms of the setup and everything else. And the one thing is, things change in life. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like the NCAA wants to change or wants to do anything to make it ideal or make it better than what it is right now. And that's the only, until you separate the Group of 5, the Power 4s and everything else, and then you don't do something with divisions, in my opinion, you're always going to have this scrutiny and unfairness because of who teams are playing. And the other thing is, they shouldn't be playing 1 AA teams either. I would knock if the schools are playing 1 AAs, I would knock them down for playing 1 AAs and not playing somebody that's a Group of 5 or another, Power 4 from someplace. And that's what I'm saying. Power 4s, you should just play Power 4 teams. Group of 5, you should just play Group of 5 teams. And, and again, because 1 AA, that to me, that should take your ranking down when you play a team like that.
Which is exactly what Indiana did when they played Indiana State, and what Penn State did when they played Villanova this year.
And then, the other thing is, take a look at some of these teams, and Penn State's a perfect example. Penn State doesn't play anybody out of conference usually.
Correct.
They play to get 3 wins, or 4 wins. They might have one semi-tough game, but and that's the other thing. These teams, load up. They think because if they can do well in their conference and maybe have 1 loss, they can get there by having 4 other wins that they out of conference, and so that's what I'm saying. Get it into that way, the way it should be, and then everybody's playing the same type of teams. And, again, then it's up to all the teams within that conference and within those divisions, get your team up to snuff to go and compete and try to win your division. Then I think you got a chance, because now if I know this, if I'm a school, say like Syracuse, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, Dan, and I'm an alma mater. Syracuse is going to have a tough time ever winning the ACC. 100%. Going to be tough.
Yeah.
Okay. But the one thing that can happen is if you go to 4 or 5 team divisions, I know this, if I'm the head coach, I can really get my team fired up, say, hey, this is a division game. We need to win the division games. And we win that division, guess what? We're basically in the playoff because we're playing in the semifinals. And then if we win that, we get to the finals. So if you win your division, you've kind of made the playoffs because now you're into the playoff to get into the Final Four. And Syracuse would have a much better chance, just like a lot of schools would, under that format than the current format that's out there.
Yeah, you know, and I'm thinking about it right now going off of your format. The ACC has 17 football member schools because Notre Dame's a member in everything but football. So if you have 17 and you break into 4 conferences, then you have, or 4 divisions within the ACC, then you're taking that and you're saying you have 4 division. It pretty much is equal. It would be 4 divisions of 4, but you're going to have 1 extra. So there'll be 1 division of 5, and then the other 3 will have 4. Syracuse's division would be Syracuse, Pitt, and BC, probably Louisville, if they wanted to put the old Big East schools together. So then that's your 4. And if Syracuse wins that division, and there's 4 divisions in the ACC, that's doable that Syracuse can win that division. So if Syracuse wins that division, and then you play the division of Virginia and Virginia Tech, and let's say Georgia Tech and somebody else, okay, so now Syracuse plays Virginia, and then there's the division of the southern, like Florida, and maybe you put somebody else in there, and then you have the West Coast with Cal and Stanford and SMU, and you pick somebody else to be a part of that. Now all of a sudden, let's say Syracuse is in a Final Four in the ACC, and the Final Four is SMU, Syracuse. So Syracuse is in the East, SMU is in the West, and then you have Virginia, and then let's say you have Miami. So now that's doable, okay? You got SMU, Virginia, and Miami, and now Syracuse has a fighting shot to do something. That could pay off dividends, and it's exciting to see that. But you brought up a great point because Penn State does not play a difficult schedule out of conference. It's a snooze schedule. And then you look at the schedule for Indiana as a snooze schedule. To be completely honest, the Big Ten, outside of Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, and now at the moment, Indiana, there's not a difficult schedule there. Purdue is atrocious. Michigan State's atrocious. You look, Penn State's been terrible this year. At the time we're talking, those teams they're not winning. You know, you got teams, like I said, Indiana's Final 4 games at the time going into those Final 4, the combined record of their opponents was 1-17. Looking at Maryland and Purdue and Penn State and Wisconsin, just awful teams. So then if they schedule an out of conference that doesn't challenge them, yeah, okay, Indiana goes 12-0, but because they played at Oregon and at Iowa, their other 10 games were nothing. But now they're undefeated, and because the Big Ten has prowess over the American, you look at that and you go, well, that's a great team. How is that a great team? If Memphis goes undefeated in the American and then they play out of conference Oklahoma State, UCLA, and Arkansas, and they win all those games, well, they say, well, those teams aren't that good. But how is that not a better out of conference schedule? And well, we don't value, and it all comes down to what conference do they value. But who is Penn State actually playing? Who is Indiana actually playing? Who is Notre Dame most of the time actually playing? And so,
and that's why I'm saying is if you go to divisions, you're playing each one of them home and away. So that helps develop rivalries. It helps for fans that know they're going, and you do it like a regional thing in terms of like the NFL, and now, I don't know, it makes too much sense, I guess. But to me, it's just something that's would be very simple to do. But again, the egos of the commissioners, and like I said, some conferences have 18 teams or whatever, and that's what I'm saying. If every conference got up to where they would have 20, and that's where you force Notre Dame, hey, you got to get into the ACC, and then you take one other team or whatever. So you can do that, but then you have something that's equitable. And like I said, I just don't think the way it's done right now, it's the best of what you can probably do, but I don't think it really gives you a true champion, in my opinion.
No. And, if you just simply look at the American this year, South Florida challenged themselves. At the time that they were, now granted, those teams are not the same right now, but at the time that they were playing, they played their out-of-conference schedule 3 out of the 4 teams that they played were ranked in the top 25. They played Boise State, who was 25. They played Miami, who was in the upper echelon of the top 10. And then they played Florida, who was like 15 at the time. But, I mean, this is...
But here's the thing that I'll tell you about that, though, too, Dan, in my opinion, is the preseason rankings and the early season rankings don't mean a hill of beans, in my opinion. Because you know what? With the portal and people coming in and changing and all that stuff, you know, I don't know why they rank teams. They shouldn't start ranking teams until you get to, you know, maybe November, you know, and then you got, because who knows? I mean, nobody knows how good anybody is with what's going on nowadays and everything else. And that's why I said, just let it play out, you know, and, you know, it's just like, you know, the college football rankings starting last week. It's almost, you know, you shouldn't even worry about rankings until November, because let it all play out and see who's good and see who's not good, and, you know, what the records are and all those sort of things. And it hurts, because you can say, okay, so-and-so beat this team, you know, early in the year, and they were ranked in the top 10. Well, you come to find out now all of a sudden they're not even in the top 20. So they really weren't that good a team.
Yeah.
So that win really doesn't mean as much now as the season progressed as people might have thought it would when they didn't know what that team really had.
Yeah.
And interesting in a situation is Penn State, you know, wins over Penn State don't mean anything.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing when people said, you know, hey, you know, come on, Dan. I mean, you know, Indiana beat Penn State. And I said, you beat a team with an interim head coach who lost their starting quarterback by 3 points because someone got their toe down. I don't consider that good. I consider that Indiana almost gets punished for that, in the sense of, like, you won, so you didn't get punished as much, but you winning that game, you're playing Penn State. Ohio State took care of Penn State, no problem. So Ohio State's better than you. And
well, it's just like Clemson. What the wins over Clemson by people early in the season, what good were they? You know?
Right, and that's
it's going to be on somebody's resume that they beat Clemson when Clemson was number 4 or 5 or whatever they were in the country, but
right.
They're not that team.
Which is why I think that when we're trying to decide who makes this college football playoff outside of the 5 highest ranked conference champions, the at-large teams that are currently at 7, and whether they're at 7 or more in the future, those at-large should be looked at by who they beat that game. Like, you look at who they beat and who they lost to, and you look at where they are at the end of the year. You can't just say you beat a top 4 team or a top 9 team. If it's Clemson or Illinois, then no. If I'm deciding between, do I let this team in or that team in, I'm looking at who did those teams end up being that you beat. So you got how many quad 1 wins now and how many quad 1 wins. I don't care about what you had back then. That doesn't matter to me. Like, Indiana fans say, well, we beat Illinois, you got to give us credit. I said, then you can't fault to Alabama for losing to Florida State, because Florida State ended up being in the top 10. So if you're going to give yourself credit for a win that's not against not a good team, you can't fault Alabama for having a loss against not a good team, because when you put Alabama and Indiana head to head, Indiana's undefeated, but Alabama's beaten 5 teams ranked in the top 25, and they beat 4 of them in a row.
Well, you can almost be sure right now, and I don't need a committee to tell me this, but ACC is probably going to get 1 team.
Yeah.
You know, the Big 12 might get 2, depending what happens with, you know, BYU and Texas Tech get into the championship game, and then BYU beats Texas Tech in that, and Texas Tech, that's the only loss going. So they might get 2, and Notre Dame's going to get in because they're not going to lose, you know, the rest of the year. And then between the Big 10 and them, they're going to have, you know, 8 to 9 teams that are going to be in it.
Yeah.
You know, 4 and 5 or whatever, you know, and I mean, so you already know how it's all going to play out. It's just a matter of, you know, the next couple of weeks. But I mean, that's what it's going to be, and it's kind of set up that way for the Big 10 and the SEC to, you know, to be that. And that's why I said, from an equity standpoint, you know, divide it up. Those, I mean, you got all these 4 that are the Power 4 conferences. Let everybody play it off, and everybody has a fair shot, and then make it to the Final 4, and then you got the, you know, and you wouldn't have to stretch the season out.
Yeah, And they won't do it because the SEC and the Big Ten are not going to give up all them extra spots. So with
No.
with that being, and I think the SEC, honestly, arguably this year should have 5 or 6 of those 12. So for Randy Etzel and myself, Dan Tortora, this has been a college football conversation about the money of it all, equity, and finding a way that makes sense. Randy, as always, I appreciate the conversations. I love talking with you, and I love that I love our friendship, and I love that you are always real with me, and that on and off the air we have these multi-layered conversations. You help to make me smarter. You help me to gain knowledge and wisdom, and I genuinely, I honestly, and I talk about you all the time, so your ears should be ringing. The fact that I get to speak with someone of your caliber about all of these things makes me feel like, God's looking kindly down on my life. So just know that I greatly appreciate the fact that you and I have the relationship that we have on and off the air, and that I can always count on you to have a great discussion.
Well, I appreciate it. And, I appreciate what you do and what you do for, college athletics and even high school athletics and everything that you do up in the Syracuse area, because it's, it's a sports town and people like their sports and they like SU and everything else. So I commend you for the longevity that you have and the continued longevity that you'll have doing what you have a passion for. So congratulations, my friend.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I've worked my butt off with a lot of help from God to be local, regional, national, and international, and to be standing there at the College Football Playoff National Championship, and there's 200-300 media people in the entire world that get to stand there. It makes you feel like everything that you're putting in, that someone's picking up what you're putting down. So, I love it. I appreciate it. I love that, we have the relationship, like I said, that we have. And when I go to a game and I'm standing on the sideline with Randy Etzel, I feel like something in my life is working in the right direction. So thank you for that.
All right, buddy. Stay, don't let that snow cause any accidents for you up there.
Yeah, I'll be safe, and you be safe as well.
All right, buddy.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Appreciate you.